Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Azrin here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to today's Learn Gujarati with me video and, of course, podcast. For those just listening to this on podcast, please note that there's a video version of this, of each podcast episode on YouTube and also on Spotify. I will mention that Spotify yesterday was acting a little bit glitchy, and I wasn't able to post a video version of the previous episode on Spotify. So we'll see if the glitch persists. And so if you go to Spotify to watch the video version and it's not there, well, it's because the glitch has continued to persist. And so you can just go to YouTube instead. So just search Learn Gujarati with me and you'll find it. So today we're going to talk about something which is the simple past tense in Gujarati. The simple past tense has quite a bit of information to cover. So we're going to go through this nice and slowly. Okay, so simple past tense. I'll write it on the screen here. What we're going to cover today is, first of all, when do we use it? Right, so when to use. We're going to go through the conjugation rules. And we're going to do the conjugation rules in two different contexts. One is going to be affirmative. The other is going to be negative. So affirmative and negative. If you watch the previous video on this YouTube channel, the one on the present tense, is like a 52-minute or 55-minute, something like that. The episode is quite long. I mentioned in that one that Gujarati is a little bit unusual in the sense that often there will be different conjugation rules with affirmative sentences versus negative sentences. So if I say I am walking or I am not walking, the conjugations are completely different. As a recap, if you don't remember what a conjugation is when you take a verb like chalvu in Gujarati. Chalvu means to walk, if you don't know. To walk. When you take something like chalvu and we change the spelling of this verb, that's a conjugation. So for example, like if I'm walking, right? If I'm walking now, chalvu becomes chalu. Hu chalu chu. But if you walked in the past, or if I walked in the past, right, it's going to be different. It'll be hu chalio. Or possibly hu chalio hato, which we'll get into today, right? Hu chalio hato, potentially. Right, so there's different spellings and pronunciations of this verb chalvu. Each one of those spellings and pronunciation is called a conjugation, and there's patterns and rules to each conjugation rule. Okay, there's a lot of it, and so I'll always try to give some practice exercises in these videos. And over time, it's not something I'm doing exactly at the moment, but over time, I will also make some content about how do you really internalize all that grammar knowledge, because it's a lot to really memorize. You're welcome to go to, if you just search Azrin the Language Nerd, Azrin the, I'll write it on the screen here, Language Nerd. If you search that on any social media platform you use, I've already made a lot of content about language learning in general on another YouTube channel, as well as on another podcast, and so on and so forth. So you're welcome to go check out other content I've made about grammar in general, but I will do it on this channel at a later date. So let's talk about when do we use the simple past tense. Okay, let's scroll down here. When do we use this tense? Well, we use it in two primary situations. The first one are completed actions. This is our first primary, what would you say, time where we use a simple past tense. In fact, really, you're going to see in a second, it's really the only, it's really the only time we use it, but we'll get there in a second. I'll give you an example of a completed action. I washed the dishes. It's done. I washed them. It's over. It's complete. I'll give you another example. I walked outside. Right? I walked outside. It happened once. It's over. I'm not outside anymore. Now I'm inside. It's complete. I'll give you another example. Actually, let's not do that. Actually, yeah, we can do it actually. You launched an app. You launched an app. You did it once, the launch is over, it's now complete. So that's the primary time we use a simple past. It's when something happened in the past and it's complete. Now, sometimes people go like, well, how do I know if it's complete? Is there a way to know when you look at a sentence if it's complete? Well, there's two primary hints. One of them is, I'm going to circle it for those watching the video or underline it. In English, our simple past more often than not ends in an ed. I washed, I walked, I walked, I launched, I created, I jumped, right? I cleaned, right? In English, when you're going from English to Gujarati, usually the English is going to end in an ed. The second way to know, and I don't really know if this is the second category. Actually, you know what? It's not a second category. Let's just cross that out. It's not a second category. Often what's going to happen is in your sentence, you're going to have a specific time word. I'll write some examples in blue. I washed the dishes this morning. When I say this morning tells you when I did it. It tells you exactly when I did it. I'll give you another example. I walked outside yesterday. Right? That's another example of a time word that tells you this is precisely when I did this. So now you know, oh, I know when it happened. You launched an app in 2002, in 2020. Right? That's another time word or a time phrase. So words like this morning, maybe this afternoon, right? Maybe something like yesterday, a week ago, right? You could have a month ago, right? A month ago. We have lots of different phrases that will indicate when something happened. And so that's often a clue to tell you that this is indeed a completed action, okay? Because it tells you precisely this is when it happened. This morning, this afternoon, yesterday, last week, a month ago, a year ago, last year, at 4 p.m., at 9 a.m., in 2019. So with these completed actions, we are going to use the simple present tense. So that's when we use it, okay? Let's put a check mark beside this. Let's go to the conjugation rules. Now, the conjugation rules are a little weird. I pre-warn you, it's a little weird, okay? In another video, we'll go into a deeper explanation of where this weirdness comes from. But today, I'll just introduce what the weirdness is. The primary weirdness with the simple past tense is that we have two sets of conjugation. In fact, yeah, let's call it two sets of conjugation rules. We have a set of conjugation rules with what are called transitive verbs. Transitive verbs. We have another set of conjugation rules which happen with what are called intransitive verbs. Transitive and intransitives. Transitive. There we go. Transitive and intransitive. These are two different types of verbs that we have. We have them in English as well. It's not just in Gujarati, but Gujarati is a little bit unusual in the sense that they have different sets of conjugation rules. A transitive verb, so that's one on the left side of the screen for those watching the video. A transitive verb, listen carefully, has an object. I'll say that again. A transitive verb has an object. Intransitive verbs do not have an object. What the heck does that mean? Okay, let's break this down. So, transitive verbs have an object. The easiest way to find an object in a sentence is if you have let me actually write an example here on the screen. Let's take a Gujarati sentence. Let's take Gujarati. Yeah, we can take Gujarati. Let's go English and Gujarati. We can do both. Let's take a sentence like I sold a house. I sold a house. Okay. Notice in English, directly after, so we have to be able to identify what a verb is. So a verb is your action word, right? The thing that you do. So in this sentence, we have sold. That's our verb in English. I sold. In English, directly after our always, is it always? Let me think. I want to say it's always. I ate a pie. Yesterday, okay, that's not true. Yesterday, yeah. With transitive verbs in English, what's going to happen is directly after our verb, we're going to have, let me use a different color. We're going to have what's called an article. Our articles in English are a, an, the, some, a, or possibly a number. A number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want to say these are, we also could have like a few, some, or a few. These are some of our most common articles in English. Really, the most common ones are going to be, well, actually, all of these on the screen here. So a, an, the, some, a few, or a number. These are very common articles in English. An article tells you how many of something. Well, this indicates a number. Like if you sold a house, we know it's one house. We know we sold a house. If you sold the house, that means there is only one house. You sold the house. Maybe you sold the White House. You are the real estate agent who sold the White House. Like there's only one of them, right? So those articles will tell you how many of your noun, in this case a house, how many of those nouns we have. I sold a house. I sold two houses. I sold a few houses. I sold some houses. So in English, when we have a transitive verb, directly after our verb, we have an article. Again, our most common articles are a, an, the, some, a few, or maybe a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. After our article, we're going to have a noun. A noun is, well, a person, place, or thing, right? Person, place, or thing. So transitive verbs in English, if you're trying to figure out, let's say you've got something you want to say and you're like, I don't know if this is transitive or intransitive. Well, to identify if it's transitive or intransitive, you need to ask yourself, is there an a, an, the, some, a few, or a number? In other words, an article. These are all called articles. Right? Is there an article? And then following the article, is there a person, place, or thing? Is there a noun, right? A person, place, or thing is a noun. So is there an article followed by a noun after your verb? I'll give you another example, an English example. I um I ate an apple. I ate an apple. Here we have our verb, which is ate. We have our article, which is an. We have our apple, which is a noun. Because our verb is followed by an article, which is then followed by a verb, we know this is a transitive. We know that ate is or rather to eat more specifically, is a transitive verb. If you want a shortcut in Gujarati when you're speaking, I don't know the exact percentage. I'm just going to throw a number out there. More actually, I don't know. Yeah, maybe 90%. 90% of the time, you're going to have transitive verbs. I don't know if it's really 90. All I'm really trying to say is the vast majority of the time, you have transitive verbs. Intransitive verbs are actually relatively uncommon. I'll give you some examples. In fact, I'll give you the only, not the only, but what? The most common intransitive verbs. I'll just literally write them on the screen for you. Okay, so we have dorvu. We have chalvu. We have bolvu. We have ungvu. Some of you might say suvu, depends on the dialect, or ungvu or suvu. There's urvu. We have hasvu. Utvu. Tarvu. I'll give you as well. I had one that popped in my mind now. I lost it. I had one that popped in. I can't remember now. Let's stick with these. There's one that came to mind, but that's okay. These are not the only ones you're going to come across. There are others. There are other intransitive verbs, but these are some of the most common day-to-day intransitive verbs that you'll hear or use. Dorvu is to run. Chalvu is to walk. Bolvu is to speak or talk. Ungvu or suvu is to sleep. Urvu is to fly. Hasvu is to laugh or smile. Utvu is to wake up. Tarvu is to swim. So what makes these verbs intransitive? Well, like what's the difference? Well, the difference with these is intransitive verbs, you don't have an object. I'll say it nice and slow. You don't have an object after your verb. I'll say it again. You don't have an object after your verb. Let me give you some examples. I swam in the pool. Actually, I'm going to be more specific with my words. You don't have an object directly after your verb. So what does that mean? I swam in the pool. Here we have swam is our verb. We have the, which is an article. We saw articles over here, right? Like I ate an apple, right? An was an article. Remember our article list? Most common ones, a, an, the, some, a few, or a specific number, right? So we do have an article here on the right, the, I swam in the pool. Yes, that is an article. Yes, after the, we have a noun, which is pool. Yes, I swam in the pool. Yes, we have an article and a noun, but it's not directly after our verb swam. We have the word in, but which is in between the word swam and the pool. They're in between. Does that make sense? So because this article, the, right, and pool, because they're not directly after the word swim, it's intransitive. I'll give you another example. Let's switch colors back to black. He walked, or even as he went. Let's do he went. Ooh, that was the verb I wanted to add earlier. He went to the park. I'm going to add that to our list of intransitive verbs. It's really common, right? To go. In the past, we get went, right? Right. That's in Gujarati, we say javu. Some people say javu when they're talking, like, but javu is our verb, right? So he went to the park. We have our verb went. We have our article the. We have our noun park, but it's broken up by this to. To is in between went and the park. So this is an intransitive verb. I'll give you one more example. This is a simpler example. I laughed. This one's even easier. There is no noun in this sentence. There's no article, there's no noun. There's no there's no the, there's no a, there's no a few, there's no 10, there's no number. It just I laughed, quite simply. That's another example of an intransitive verb. So these intransitive verbs have no object. Transitive verbs have objects. As a shortcut, most of the time you're going to be dealing with transitive verbs and not intransitive verbs. Most of the time. Okay, maybe 10% of the time. Again, I don't know if it's really 10%, but the vast majority of the time it's transitive verbs we're dealing with. Okay, now, so let's just do a very quick recap. We use the simple past tense with completed actions. Completed actions are things that happened in the past and they're done. It's a one and done. It's over. Okay. Often with completed actions, but not always, but often we're going to have a time phrase. This morning, yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, in 2021, in 2022, in 2019, at 9 a.m., we're going to have a time word after our completed action, or in that sentence, rather. Right? That's when we use it. When it comes to conjugations, we have two different categories of conjugations. We have transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. We're going to see two different sets of conjugation rules for each one. There's a reason for that, but we'll tackle that another day. Let's start with the transitive verbs because it's the most common. So transitive verbs, remember, they have an object. The first thing you need to know is our pronouns. In other words, our subject pronouns more specifically. So we have I, you, he or she, we, they. So I is going to be me. You is going to be te for informal. And it'll be tame. Sorry. Let's change the, I'm going to write capital T's here. Te, that's informal. And tame for more formal. He and she. Oops, there we go. He and she, we're going to have ane, or in writing, you'll often see tene. They're the same meaning. Ane, tene. These are both informal. The formal version of he and she is going to be emre, or in writing, you'll see more temre. Emre, temre. This is more formal. So if you're referring to someone who is older than you, or a stranger, or someone higher in status, right? We're going to use these formal versions here. Okay. We're going to have ame or apre. Again, we have the inclusive and exclusive we. So ame, exclusive, apre, inclusive. In other words, if you don't know what that means, very simply, if you're talking to someone and you're like, hey, we went to the park, but the person you're talking to didn't go to the park with you, ame. But if you tell someone, hey, we went to the park, and one of the people who went to the park was the person you're talking to, apre. I have a video about that. It's one of the very first videos or episodes, so you can go back and watch that if you want to. Okay, lastly, teo e is going to be they. Often when people speak, you're going to hear something like loco, e. Basically, every single time we have teo, when we speak, we often say loco. Some people say loca, right? Some people say loca, loco, 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 loca. But the most important thing is we're going to add this loco, teo, e. Okay, we're going to leave loco here. Loco, e. So these are our pronouns. So we're going to start with this. So no matter what your sentence is, this will be the first word in the sentence. Some of you might be wondering, like, well, Azran, hang on a sec. In previous videos and previous episodes, you said that the word for I, let's switch colors. You told me that I is actually hu. You told me that you is tu or tame. You told me he and she is either te in writing more often, more often, te or let's just say. You told me that they is teo. Why are some of these different? Why is me, or why is who become me? Why is tu become te? Right? Why is te and become ene, tene, or of course emne, temne? Like why are there changes here? Well, I'll give a simplified answer for now, and we'll do a more in-depth answer another day. The simplified answer is that Gujarati has unlike English, Gujarati has multiple words for all of their subject pronouns. So subject pronouns are all words we use to indicate a person. So here we have like for example, I, right? Me, or let's just take the English word. The English word I, right? I am a person. So it's a word that's indicating a person, or you are a person, right? That's a word indicating a person, right? All these subject pronouns could be replaced by people's names. So subject pronoun is something you could replace with someone's name. So subject pronouns in English, we only really have I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. We have 7. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. 7. I have a whole video on this. Again, it's one of the very first videos on the channel, but or on the podcast rather. But there's 7. Gujarati has, on a basic level, there's what? Hu, tu, tame, e, ame, apne, teo. I guess you have 7 as well. But what's a little bit trickier in Gujarati is that there's different versions of each pronoun. So there's actually multiple words for I. There's actually me, mare, mane. There's 4 words for I, right? There's basically 3 or 4. There's multiple variants of each one of these subject pronouns. That's something we'll cover in more depth in another time. But for now, just know that in the past tense, when we're dealing with transitive verbs, right? We are going to change our subject pronouns. We're going to have me, te, tame, ene, tene, emne, temne, ame, apne, teoe. Okay. Now for our verb, so we have our subject pronoun here. Okay. For our verb, let's make a table. This one will be a little bit bigger, I think. I'll make it really big, and if I don't need all the space, fair enough. I don't need all the space, but we'll make it really big anyway, just in case I need it. Okay. So we have a pronoun over here. We'll have our we'll put our verb here in the middle, and then English translation. So actually, let's do pronoun. No, you know what? It's okay. We'll do like this. We'll just do like that. And like this. Okay, there we go. This is our pronoun. Subject pronoun specifically. Right then here we'll have our verb phrase. Okay. So let's put our pronouns down the left. Me. We have tame. We have te. We have ene. Terne. Emne. Temne. We have let's do ame apne next. We have ame apne. And then we have teo at the bottom. Okay, now what's a little bit weird, not weird, but a little bit unusual, let's say, for our when we conjugate verbs based on transitive verbs, it doesn't matter what pronoun we use. I'll say it again. It doesn't matter what pronoun we use. When we did, for example, the present tense, really any tense in Gujarati, well, let's say frequent, often, and most of the time, let's say, in Gujarati and in English as well, lots of languages, we conjugate our verb based on our pronoun. So if I'm doing something, or if you're doing something, like if હું કંઈક કરું છું અથવા તમે કંઈક કરો છો, right? If I'm doing something કે તમે કંઈક કરો છો, right? If you're doing something or I'm doing something, the verb is going to change in spelling and pronunciation. In our past tense, in our simple past tense with transitive verbs, which is the vast majority of them, what matters is not the pronoun. The pronoun doesn't matter. Who cares? Okay, we're not going to care about the pronoun. What we care instead is what we care about instead is the gender of the object that we're doing something to. Remember how we had objects here in transitive verbs, right? House and apple and so on and so forth. We had objects. Well, the gender of that object is what we conjugate based on. So let me give you some examples here. Let's say we're selling a phone. A phone in Gujarati is masculine. Phones are masculine. Why? I don't know, but it just is, okay? So we're going to have phone vecho or vencho, depends on the dialect. I'm going to put vencho. Right? Phone vencho. So if I sold a phone, me phone vencho. You sold a phone, tame phone vencho. Right? If you informally sold a phone, te phone vencho. Doesn't matter. It's always phone vencho. Why? Because phone is masculine. Now, what if you sold more than one phone? Right? What if you sold two phones? Right? Let's say you had be phone. Now we're gonna have ya. So if I sold two phones, me be phone vencha. You sold two phones, tame be phone vencha. He sold three phones or two phones, whatever. Emne be phone vencha. Right? It doesn't matter who did it. It just matters all that matters is I'll put this in a different color, gender and plurality. Plurality means, was it one phone? That means singular, or two phones. More than one. One or more than one. If it's one, great, we have a set of rules. More than one, another set of rules. Okay? So me phone vencio, me be phone vencia. So here we have, I'm going to put some annotations. Phone here is it's masculine and it's singular. One phone, so it's singular, masculine because phone is masculine. Here we have masculine and plural. Why? More than one phone. It's plural. Everything that's masculine singular, we're going to have yo. Everything masculine plural, we have ya. All right. Let's say you sold a book. Okay, book is chopri. Chopri. Chopri is feminine. So if someone sold a book, we can't say vencio, we can't say vencia, we're going to say venci. This is feminine and singular. Singular because you only had one, feminine because book is feminine. What if you sold 2 books? Right, so more than one now. So 2, be, chopri, same thing, doesn't change. Venci. So feminine plural and feminine singular are the same. Now, what if you sold a house? Okay. Ghar. Is it going to be vencio? No. Vencia? No. Venci? No. It's going to be vench you. Why? Because a house, ghar, is neuter. It's not masculine, it's not feminine, it's neuter. And it's singular, because you sold one house. If you sold 2 homes, we're going to have ya. Me be ghar vencia. This is neuter and plural because you have more than one. Whew, a lot of information here, no? They're quite difficult, maybe. Will require some practice. I'll give you lots of exercises to practice in a moment. So we have, again, for most verbs, for the vast majority of verbs in Gujarati, it doesn't matter who does the action. It matters instead the the gender of the thing that you did an action to. So house is neuter, so we're going to conjugate that one way. A book, chopri, is feminine, so we're going to conjugate that differently. A phone is masculine, so we're going to conjugate that differently. Does that make sense? Hope that makes sense. A quick rule of thumb to figure out if a noun, because you need to be able to identify noun gender. Masculine nouns tend, not always, tend to end in o. Feminine nouns tend to end in e. Neuter nouns tend to end in u. Unfortunately, that's a very loose rule, and there are lots of words that don't end in o, e, u. So you're not going to know if it's masculine, feminine, you're just not going to know. In which case, you're going to have to take an educated guess. If you guess incorrectly, you'll still be understood. It's actually a relatively minor mistake, which is good news. So these are our transitive. The vast majority of verbs are gonna follow this set of rules. Okay, these are transitive verbs. Again, stick around to the end. I will give you some practice exercises. We're just gonna go through the content first. I know it's quite a bit, but feel free to rewatch this as needed and do the exercises. The exercises will also help, the ones that we do at the end. Okay, now for the remaining 10% of our verbs, that's our the minority of our verbs, the intransitive verbs, right? We have a little bit of a different, what would you say, set of conjugation rules. But the good news, however, is that we're still going to use this yo, ya, e, you, ya system. We're still going to use that exact same system. We're still going to use all these yo, ya, yi. These endings, verb endings, are going to stay the same. What changes is that for intransitive verbs, because there is no noun, remember, there's no object. When we looked at our intransitive verbs, right? If we have I laughed, and I laughed, hun hasyo, there is no object. So we can't conjugate our verb based on an object when there may not be an object, right? And he went to the park, e park ma gayo, right? The park is not our object because it's broken up by two, right? Or I swam in the pool. We have in that's breaking up the and pool. So the pool is not an object. So even there, like when we don't have an object, what do? Well, instead of conjugating a verb based on the gender and plurality of the object, we do it based on the gender and plurality of our pronoun instead. So let me show you what that looks like. We can put another chart. So again, this is now we're looking at transitive verbs. Intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs. So our pronouns are going to change. We're going to have, but luckily or thankfully, they're what you'd expect them to be. Hun, tame, tu, e or te, teo, ame, apre. These are kind of our standard pronouns, which you might already be familiar with. Right, let's put some, actually might need more space than that actually. Let's see how this goes. So for hun, right, we're gonna have hun. Let's just take the verb chalvu. Hun chalio if you're a boy. Hun chali if you're a girl. Right? So again, notice same yo ending up here, right? For phone, when it's one phone is masculine, we use yo. When you are a boy and you are walking, you are one person, you are singular, not single, maybe you are single too, I don't know, but you're singular, we have yo. If you're a girl, we have e, un chali, just like when there was one book, it's chopri venchi, like if that e stays consistent. For tame, we're gonna have chalia, we use the plural form, tame chalia, only one option here. Tu, we're gonna have chalio for boys. If you're talking to a boy, chalio. If you're talking to a girl, chali. He and she, same thing as for tu. If you're talking to a boy, chalio. Talking to a girl, chali. I'm not talking to, rather talking about a boy, talking about a girl. If the he or she you're referring to is someone that you want to show respect to, extra respect, we're going to say chalia, just like for tame. For they, we're going to have sorteo. We're going to have chalio. Chalio. Sorry, wrong one. Chalia. Chalia. Now, this one, I'm genuinely trying to figure this out right now because I actually don't know. I think there's some dialectal differences. I think a lot of people would just say chalia, but I've also been wondering if some people, if it's a group of girls, would say chali. But I think there might be a dialectal difference here. I just don't know yet. I'm honestly not sure. Okay. Ame apne, we're going to have chalia. So the plural form. As a quick recap, because maybe if you haven't seen the previous videos, for all of our verbs, just as a very quick recap, we have what's called an infinitive form. So all verbs in Gujarati, they end in vu. For all verb conjugations, past, present, whatever, this first part here in red, chal, stays the same, but the vu goes away. So like the verb for sell is vengeful. Right, vengeful. That vu goes away and gets replaced with a different ending. So it's replaced like with phone, right? We have me phone vencio, right? Replaced with a yo, for example. I've covered that before, but maybe if you haven't watched that video, just to make that clear. Okay, I know it's a lot of information. Again, please stick around to the end. We'll do some practice exercises, and I will give you some exercises too of how to practice. We've gone through our affirmative rules. You might be like, oh my God, Aslan, there's more? Yep, there's more. So you might want to watch this video in multiple chunks because there's a lot of information. Let's wrap up with our negative rules. Let's go do those. Scroll down to the bottom here. Actually, let's just keep this over here. The negative rules are actually pretty straightforward. There's nothing, yeah, it's relatively straightforward, I suppose. And what we're going to do, let me get a different color here. I'm also going to do a little bit of erasing to clean this up. Oops. Let's clean this up a bit. Erase this line. Feel free to fast forward like 10, 20 seconds if you want. Let's get rid of this gender and everything. Get rid of this plurality. Okay. We can even get rid of, actually, we'll leave that there. All right. Redraw some lines here. Okay. For the vast majority of our verbs, so that's going to be our transitive verbs. To make it negative, we simply use the word noto. Noto. It's pronounced not like N-O-T-O, noto. Oops. Pronounced N-O-T-O, but it's actually spelled, if you write it in Gujarati, it's like na hot, like na, how do you say that? Like na hoto, I guess, but pronounced noto. Okay. Oops. 1 second here. Sorry, my screen share is frozen. Oh no! Wait 1 second. Let me fix this. How do I fix this? Wait 1 second. Okay, wait 1 second. I'm just gonna pause my recording so I can fix this screen share. Okay, there. I think it's better now. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's working good. Okay, great, perfect. So anyway, so we're gonna have noto if it's masculine singular rather. Masculine singular. Let's erase this here to create some space. Okay. We're going to do nota for masculine plural, noti for feminine singular. We also have noti for feminine plural, noti. We have nota down here for neuter singular. I'll give you some examples in a sec, don't worry. Sorry, notane, notu, notu, notu. Notu for neuter singular. and nota for neuter plural. Let me just make sure that actually showed up on my screen because it was not working a second ago. Yes, it did show up. Good. Okay, perfect. Good. So if like I didn't sell a phone, me phone vencio noto. Or and Gujarati has what's called flexible word order. You can basically put words wherever the heck you want. So me phone noto vencio. Me phone vencio noto is also acceptable. Noto can kind of go in every Gujarati sentence. You can basically take the words and put them almost anywhere you want in the sentence, as long as your verb goes at the end, roughly speaking, and you start the sentence with a pronoun. Roughly speaking, words can go anywhere in the sentence, roughly speaking. So me phone noto vencio or me phone vencio noto are both correct. Me be phone nota vencia or me be phone vencia nota. Me chopri venci or me chopri venci noti. Right? Sorry, me chopri venci is affirmative. Me chopri venci noti. I didn't sell one. Me noti venci chopri, right? If it's more than one book, same thing. Chopri noti venci. Be chopri noti venci. If it's a ghar, right? Me ghar notu venciu. Venciu. Be ghar hoy to me be ghar nota vencia. So we're just going to use noto, nota, noti, notu, nota. Same for our intransitive verbs. Let's just zoom out a bit. It's going to be a bit smaller, but be easier to show you. We take all of these here and they get transferred down to our intransitive verbs. So hu noto chalio, right? Or hu noti chali. Tame nota chalia or chalia nota. Really straight, really straightforward. There are other ways to negate as well, by the way. You can also negate using nati. We get some, so Gujarati is a bit interesting where we have dialectal differences depending on where you go and depending on who you talk to. So like, for example, we could replace, my family personally doesn't do it, and I think people I talk to or have talked to, it's not something to do as often, but I do want to say that there are some dialects, but these notus, notis, notas, some people I think will say nati instead. Me phone nati vencio. We could say that as well, actually. As I said, it sounds actually quite natural, but it sounds a bit, I don't know what's different about that. They're pretty similar, but me phone nati vencio. That to me, at least to me, if I said me phone nati vencio, for example, I feel like that would be I haven't sold my phone yet. Like I haven't sold it. Not that I didn't sell it, but like I haven't. I'm going to think on that one in case of something else, but I do feel like there's a nati here, but I think the meaning might change. So we'll leave that aside for now. For now, just stick with what I told you, and I'll think on that and maybe like a separate video if there's something worth going into. Okay, a lot of information. How do we practice this? Well, I'll give you some exercises. Let's zoom back in fully. There we go. Okay. And a few ways to practice. So this is something relatively similar to the last video that I already gave you. One is to use Chat GPT. Right, Chat GPT. What you would do is you go to chat, the website, if you don't know what it is, it's chat.openai.com. You could also download the Chat GPT app as well. And then you're basically going to tell Chat GPT, give me 100 sentences. You'll tell Chat GPT this word per word. Give me 100 sentences in the simple past in English. Rather, let's switch that. Give me 100 sentences That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Give me 100 sentences in the simple past for beginner ESL students. When you do that, you're going to get a whole bunch of sentences in the simple past. Translate them. Like try to translate those to Gujarati, right? So try to translate them. Right? Translate them and negate them. Negate them as well. So maybe make it like I did buy a phone, I didn't buy a phone, right? Like do a negation as well. So translate them and then also write a negative form. Right? Write down a negated form. Right? Then you're gonna have someone to oops, sorry. You're gonna get someone to correct them for you. So whether it's me, right? Because if you're, I mean, I don't have a ton of time for new students personally that at the moment as I'm recording this, but maybe if things change, you're welcome to ask me. Right? You're gonna get someone to correct them. Could be me, could be a family member, could be someone you know, right? This is a very straightforward way to practice. The other one you can do as well is this is something you just should be doing as a general whole, right? As a general whole, something you just should be doing, especially if you have an intermediate level, right? Just listen and read to Gujarati on a regular basis, right? Listen and read to Gujarati, right? And then when you hear or see past tense sentences, right? Like actually pause and be like, oh, that's in the past tense, right? Pause, write it down yourself, say it out loud yourself as if you were that person. Um, Write it down in a notebook, right? These are ways to do, right? To actually like start to reinforce this knowledge in your brain. The other thing you'll want to do as well, I'll give you another practice exercise. Soon, hopefully, at some point in the future, you can do this with well, I don't know. Never mind. Actually, what another way you can practice as well is I don't know why I keep numbering these off 1 and 2, but it's okay. What you could do as well is um, how do I say this? Talk to people in Gujarati, right? But don't talk without thinking. So if you're a heritage language speaker, so you grew up with Gujarati, which is quite probable if you're watching this, or it's quite possible, or maybe you speak like Hindi or something, which is quite similar, right? When you talk to people, right, don't talk without thinking. Like pause before your sentences and think to be like, is that actually what I want to say? Is that sentence actually right? Don't just get the sentence to come out of your mouth, which is really common. People do that. Don't just say it for the sake of saying it to get your message across. Pause and be like, is that right? Right? So don't talk automatically. It's really hard to do that, but I'm telling you it'll be helpful. With one person, right? One person who's trying to help you learn, right? Don't talk automatically, right? Like actually pause and think like, is this right? Right? And then you can actually pause and ask if what you said is correct. Right? So when you say something and you're unsure, you're like, was that right? Could I said that of a different could I have said that a different way? Was that actually right? Should I have said this or should I actually say this? Right? So pause and ask if what you're saying is correct. Okay, so these are 3 different ways to practice. Chat GPT, you get those sentences out there for you, translate them, write a negative form, right? Listen and read to Gujarati and pay attention to how the past tense is being used, when it's being used. Pause when that happens. Say the sentence out loud yourself. Write it down separately in a notebook, right? Um, Talk to people in Gujarati and don't talk automatically if you already have a conversational level. Pause and think like, is this really right? Think it is. Yes. Then you say it and then ask the person if you're talking to if it was right or wrong. If there's another way to say it even. The last way I'll give you to practice, you can kind of pick the ones that align the most with you, is keep a journal. You know, keep a Gujarati journal. That'll also be very helpful, I think, to keep a Gujarati journal. Um, that should also be that's one way to practice because when you're writing, right, keep a journal and you'll have to have someone correct it. So maybe don't keep a diary where it's really personal things because someone will have to correct your writing, right? Get someone to correct it. To correct. There we go. You'll need to get someone to correct it, but this is also one way to practice. So okay, and then the journal. By the way, if you want to practice the past tense specifically, write about your day. Like what happened today? What'd you do? Where'd you go? How'd you feel? So on and so forth. And you can do that every single day as a way to practice. Okay, let's wrap that up there. Thank you for listening and watching. Hope that was useful, and we'll chat later. Aujo.